And I know when you was in school, Terry, they said you cannot use the word to define the word. So you can't you can't use that word. So what's the difference? Okay, so what's the difference between inspection and appraisal?
Well, appraisal is the value.
Mhm.
Inspection is the what's functions of the home.
Okay. All right. So the appraisal is about determining the value, and the inspection is about the function of the home. Okay, I like that. So now, so Jamie, what do you know about inspections? Jamie, did we lose him? All right. Oh, is that us? We froze?
Can y'all hear me?
All right, yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah, it was our internet. We got froze. All right,
Okay.
so Jamie, what do you know about inspections?
I just know that inspections is it's a requirement. It's something that has to be done, in order to I want to say to determine the value, but that's what appraisals do. So that's
Right.
not the right answer. I guess it's to make sure that you have the correct. How can I phrase this? To make sure that what's yours is yours. That's a, I don't know how to say this. Like for me, for my understanding, like inspections are to make sure what's what's supposed to be in place is in place, and what's yours is yours, and that you're not leaving. Because like when the inspector comes in, like don't they also make sure like uh what do you call that? Don't they also make sure like what do you call that? Like marking
What the
the
parameters?
t-
I think
yeah.
all right, I think you're thinking about a survey, which is good.
Okay.
So that's good. So, we can talk about what's in between you got the appraiser, you got the inspector, you got the surveyor, right? And they all have different responsibilities. But before we jump into it, we got us a new person, Sylvina. Hey, Sylvina. Sylvina. It's right there. If you look right there, and then they see. That's why I told her to make it bigger. Hey, Sylvina, unmute yourself if you're trying to talk, Sylvina. Because what we're doing is just so I can get an idea of where everybody's understanding is as it relates to inspectors. I'm asking, what do you understand as far as an inspector? We were supposed to have our inspector here today, but he had an emergency, so that's why I'm pinch hitting. That's what brokers do. We pinch hit to make it happen. I didn't want to cancel it. All right. Oh, there she go. Hey, Sylvina. So, Sylvina, type in the chat. What do you understand? You can mute yourself, or you can type in the chat. What do you understand as it relates to an inspector? Like, what is an inspector or an inspection? And while you're typing your answer in here, we'll look at the difference between the appraiser, the survey, and the inspector. So, the appraisal, the bank. All right, so let me ask you this question. Do you have to do an appraisal for every transaction? Is it mandatory that you do an appraisal for every transaction?
I thought it was.
The bank most likely will require it.
Right. So Jamie says, right. So Jamie, no, it's not mandatory for every transaction. Now, it's a great um, habit to do. So now, the bank, if you're getting a loan, you're getting financing, then yeah, you're gonna have to. Oh, there go Kim. What up, Kim? If you're getting a bank financing, then yeah, the bank is going to require you to get a loan. But I'm sorry, to get an appraisal. They're gonna require that. But if you're paying cash, then
Oh, okay.
you don't have to get
Right.
an appraisal. So now if I'm working with a cash buyer though, then I'm going to recommend that they get an appraisal, but they don't have to. It's still up to them to do it. So the appraiser is hired. So who hires the appraiser? Who pays for that?
We do, I thought.
Right.
Not the realtor, the person
Unless it's negotiated.
that's buying
Buyer.
the property, right?
Absolutely. So the buyer is the one paying for the appraisal. And just kind of bring you up to speed, Kim, our inspector that was going to be presenting today had a little emergency. So I didn't want to cancel it, so I'm pinch hitting. And we're just going to be talking about some basics of as it relates to inspectors and things like that. I'm talking about the appraisal just to get clarity on the difference between, you know, the appraisal, the surveyor, and the inspector, right? So Kim, you can jump in here. You can either jump in the chat or you can unmute yourself if you want to make comments to the discussion. So it's going to be more of like a discussion. We'll spend about an hour or so together and then we'll be done. Okay, so great opportunity if you guys have questions or need clarity as it relates to those three or really any component to the buyer transaction. So the buyer, yeah. So in most instances, the buyer's paying for it. So now, how does that process look though? Like, does the buyer call the appraiser and schedule it himself?
No,
Who does it?
no. I thought the realtor does.
All right, so Jamie thought the realtor. Who'd you
I
think?
guess if it's cash.
Or either the loan officer, but I thought the realtor does it.
All right.
No, because the buyer, we have, that's a good, if it's a bank, we know that if it's being financed, we know that it's a bank, but what if it's not and it's cash?
Yeah, so if it's, all right, so good question. So yeah, so through the lender is the one that's going to coordinate it. But is the lender calling the appraiser to schedule it?
No, the appraiser will call the client.
No. I'm talking about to order the appraisal.
Oh, the lender orders.
All right, so
it.
Savina says yes, the lender is calling to order it. You're saying yes. What do you say, Jamie?
I thought it was the realtor, man.
All right, so Jamie thought it was the realtor. So no, the realtor, that is not a part of our roles or responsibilities, scheduling the appraiser. Now, technically it is going through the lender, but the lender is not ordering it. All right, so now
So it's the loan officer.
Yeah, the loan officer, they're not ordering it. So prior to 2009, that was the case.
Mhm.
But, you know, because of the recession, the bottom fell out. And a lot of it, Congress, they believed that it had to do with these syndicates, right? The realtor getting with the lender and the lender getting with the appraiser, and they, you know, working together to inflate these prices. So because of that, they let's see. So Savina says the buyer fills up a request and pays for it. All right, so this is how it goes. So prior to that, yeah, that's what would happen. The lender or the loan officer, whatever, they would have different appraisal companies that they work with. They would call that company and they would order the appraisal, right? But then when Dodd-Frank went through Congress, and they put all these protections to avoid another recession, then that piece of it was not allowed anymore. So the lender does not actually call the appraisal company. There's an intermediary now to where the lender goes through a third party company and tells them we need an appraisal. And then that company, that intermediary company, then coordinates and schedules the appraisal. So the lender is not even able to pick what appraisal company that they use anymore. Yeah. So the way it works, when it's that time to get an appraisal done, then that lender reaches out to that appraisal scheduling company, and then that appraisal scheduling company reaches out to the appraisal. So for the appraiser, for the lender or the realtor to even get access to the appraiser's information, the appraiser has to reach out to us. So now, when the appraiser is like, if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, if the appraiser calls you, then now you got his phone number. So that's whenever y'all are doing a deal, if the appraiser calls you, take his number down. Because now if you run into a situation and you want to get the appraisal report, you want to get an update, you maybe want to talk to him about maybe the value that he came up with. The only way that you're ever going to get his contact information is at that point that he reaches out to you. And that's the same thing. And that's kind of how lenders are capturing the appraiser's contact information as well. And the reality is that if you get an appraiser that's operating completely 100% by the book, then they won't even talk to you because you know you got to have that arm's length situation. So that's how it goes. So yes, that so kind of what Sylvina says, it's through the lender. The buyer in essence pays for it because they don't even really request it. The lender requests it, orders it, and then the buyer pays for it as a part of the fees. Now, do they pay for it up front or they pay for it at closing?
Probably at closing, man.
Jamie said closing.
Well, I think I had to pay for mine, well, when I refinanced it.
Hey,
Yep, you got to pay for it up front. So that's one of those fees you pay for up front. What about the inspector? When do you pay for that?
I'll never forget that.
You pay for that inspector up front. All right, so we understand what the appraisal is, where that fits in the transaction. So Jamie, you kind of get it now where the appraiser fits in?
yeah.
All right, and at what point is it ordered? Let me ask that question. So at what point of the process is the appraisal ordered?
Probably within after they collect all the fees, after they.
When it's requested, I'm thinking.
Fees, they'll then order. Then it's pretty fast, within like a week or so. Right?
So if I so we got the executed contract, it's signed, right? We send that to the title company. At what point is the lender going to order the appraisal? All right, so you say a week. What do you say, Jamie?
We talking about time or we talking about technicality? Because I think it's gonna. I mean, I'm just being honest. I don't think it's a time thing. I think it has to do with a process, right?
A process, absolutely. Okay, so I'll take that. So Sylvina and Kim kind of answering the question. So we have our option period, then that's when the inspector goes out there, right? So then usually what I'm seeing lately, and Kim, you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing the lender submit the packet to underwriting. And then when it comes out of underwriting with conditions, I'm starting to see them order the appraisal then.
Right.
So
right. That's what I was thinking.
So that's what I'm saying, Kim. The loan officer or the originator sends the initial packet to the underwriter, let them look at it. Then they'll send back the conditional approval letter, which shows whatever conditions that they need to satisfy. And then that appraisal is always one of those conditions. So now that buyer is working on those conditions and then they order the appraisal. So then when they resubmit to the underwriter, they resubmit it together. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, I've seen it being ordered immediately after the expiration of the option period as well.
Yeah. Okay. So Kim's seeing it immediately. So as soon as that 10-day, say if you got a 10-day option period, you do the inspection, everything's good, you decide you're going to move forward with the transaction. At that point, you're seeing the lenders order the appraisal as well. So before they even submit for the initial approval.
Right. And what I found, that became a practice at a point when there were so many refi and there was kind of a backlog with getting appraisals or extended periods. So they were putting the request out. And so you still kind of see that sometimes it will get requested that early, but certainly what you're describing is also a trend as well.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. See, it's good for me to have another senior agent on here with me, because I just be in this office all the time. Kim really out there in the field getting these deals in. All right, so that's kind of that's kind of at the phase of where you're going to see the appraisal ordered. So if I had to say, all right, which comes first, the appraisal or the inspection? Which one's going to come first?
Inspection, right?
Inspection. So the inspection is going to be ordered first. All right, so now. So the appraiser is there to deal with the whole value piece, and that's really for the lender and things like that. The inspection, is that mandatory? Do we have to order inspection?
It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended. You'd be crazy not to.
Do we have to do it? Jamie, do we have to order inspection? Sylvina, do we have to order it?
Yes.
All right, Jamie say yes.
If it's an investor, they can have their own inspection.
What you got,
I mean, if it's being, if I guess if you're just buying it
as far as
cash, you
text,
don't have to. But I'm thinking if you're financing it, you definitely have to.
all right. So no. So Sylvina, right. So no says no. Terry says no. Jamie, no. So Jamie, you do not have to order an inspection. Now, it
Right.
is as real estate professionals, it's highly advisable, highly, highly advisable that you order an inspection. Right.
And more than likely, if you're financing it, you're gonna have to get an inspection.
No,
Isn't that right?
if you're financing it, it is not mandatory for you to get an inspection. Now, you
The
got
lender's not gonna require it.
no, it's not. The bank does not require an inspection. The bank only requires an appraisal. And a
I
Oh
have,
wow.
they're gonna
I
require
have an addition to that. There are some grants that are available. One particularly here in the city of Houston, that $30,000 grant associated with the hurricane. It is a requirement that you have to have that as a underwriting condition for that grant with the city of Houston.
Okay, awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that, Kim, because I had no clue about that. So, under the circumstances of if you're gonna get, and that's that grant for down payment assistance, Jess, you got Brooks's text. So, Kim, that's for 30,000 for down payment assistance. for Hurricane Harvey?
It's the Harvey. It's a HAP. Harvey. It has something to do with the Harvey flood. It's different than or different from the down payment assistance.
Okay,
If you
but
go
the
to
money,
the
what
I'm
could the
sorry.
money be used for?
You can use it for down payment. You can use it for closing costs. You can also use it against the price of the home as well.
Gotcha. Okay. But okay, so for that, so for that particular program, it is a requirement. But if you're not getting that program, because even for down payment assistance, depending on if you're going through the city or the county or the SEF, like none of them require an inspection. And again, the lender is not going to require an inspection. So that's how that works. You get it, Jamie?
Mhm.
Now, as real estate professionals, what we gonna do when we talking to our clients?
Advise them to get it.
We're gonna advise them to get it. Now, can we make them get it? No, can't make your client do nothing, but we're gonna advise them to get it. All right. So some of the ways that when I'm talking to my clients, and if I have a client that doesn't want to do it, because right now we have a client, Margaret's working with them, and she didn't want to do the inspection. She didn't want an option period, didn't want to do the inspection, barely wanted to do an appraisal. But because for her it was, I just want to get the house done. I want to get the deal done. And she was, she had spent time in new home sales. Every now and again you'll get these clients that feel like they know more than you do. So she's like, I know what I'm doing. I know the process. So, when you run into a situation like that, I have a conversation with her and say, hey, well, look, it's, I understand that you don't want to get the inspection. You feel like it takes time, but what happens if, like, that's how I approach it. What happens if after you buy the house, the entire AC system goes out? What happens if after you buy the house, you realize there's something wrong with the plumbing or something wrong with the electricity? Because at that point, after you close, you can't go back to that seller. You can't even try to sue the seller, whatever, based off of non-disclosure. Because if the seller didn't know about it, you would have to prove that the seller knew about it before they sold it to you. So what happens if that happens, right?
You're out of pocket a lot of money, and I even recommend it with a new build.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. So when you run into a situation and you're trying to encourage or convince a buyer to do that, because as professionals, we know, that puts buyers in the best situation, best level of protection. When you run into one that's pretty indignant about not doing it, I kind of go through that series of questioning, like, well, what happens if this happens? What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if this happens? So you can kind of paint that picture of possibilities, not knowing. So and then I also tell them this: look, you don't even have to. It's not even a matter of you saying you got to go after the seller and you try to renegotiate and get them to pay for things. You ain't even got to use the inspection for that. But at least for your own information, right? So now you know going in, hey, you know what? At some point, I'm gonna have to get this fixed, or at some point, I'm gonna have to kind of look into this. So you have that information, so you're not going in blind. That's another thing that a way that I encourage or convince people to take advantage of getting an inspection. Go ahead, Terry.
And I always share my personal story.
Okay.
My last home that I had built, it was still a builder. Of course, I was one of the ones, oh, I know it all. This is the third home I bought, and I don't need an inspection, an additional inspection.
Oh, so you was that
Yes,
that buyer, huh?
Yes, I was that buyer. The bank had an inspection, and plus they have to get inspections through the city and all that good stuff. However, about within a year, come to find out, long story short, the home, the AC was not large enough for the home, and it had 2 units.
It had 2 units, and it still wasn't enough capacity for the house.
Units were not big. The units were not big enough.
Wow.
So thank God I had American Home Shield. And American Home Shield, we were having to call them out like every 6 to 8 months, right after we moved into the home.
Yeah.
10 years later, finally one of the contractors that we were using, because it was several through American Home Shield,
Right.
finally said, guess, hey, these 2 units are big enough for the home.
Wow.
So guess what we had to do? We had to replace 2 units. And the units cost about $8,000, $9,000. And that was with the assistance of American Home Shield.
Wow.
So it would have been more. That could have been like a $25,000-$30,000
expense. Wow.
And fortunately, only by the grace of God, when we sold the home, they didn't bring it up. But we disposed it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but y'all went ahead, but y'all got it replaced though, right?
We got one of the units.
Oh, y'all didn't get both units replaced. Shame.
Shame. But we had to, continuously do maintenance on the other one.
But that's a good, but that right there is a good way. That's a good story to, like I said, when you run into those situations.
Windows as well. We had problems with the windows.
Yeah, that one of that's like even and it doesn't even have to be your story, right? Y'all could take exactly what Terry just said, and y'all could use that as a tool to convince your buyers to do the right thing, because you want that to happen. Because here's the reality about real estate, and you're going to see this, right? Just because you're right doesn't necessarily mean somebody's not going to come after you, right? And sometimes you just don't want to have to deal with the heartache of the headache of defending yourself. So go ahead and get the inspection in place.
I had a meeting scheduled for 12:30.
What was that? Hey Drake, come on back, bud. So we're actually, I don't know how they double booked us, because we do trainings on Thursdays at 12. But I think it'll be good information, and then you and I can connect afterwards. Is that cool?
I'm a bit late because I got lost in navigation.
Oh, it happens, buddy. So we're talking about inspections, all right?
Inspections?
Yeah, we're talking. So this training is about inspections, inspection reports, and kind of where they fit within the process of home buying. So I think it'll be some good information for you. All right. So testimonials are very important. But yeah, so using Terry's story, using it as a tool to leverage to really convince, because you want that buyer, because you want to cover your bases, so you ain't got to worry about that buyer coming back afterwards trying to go after you saying, hey, my realtor did not explain it to me, or my realtor should have emphasized it, or whatever the reason. You don't want to have to deal with that headache. All right, so on the note of inspection, what's your advice for agent being present at the inspection? All right, great question, Kim. My opinion is, if for the first maybe 1 or 2 inspections that you've ever done as a new agent, I think you need to go to them, because it's a great educational, it's a great learning experience for you to attend the inspection. So you can see kind of the process. You can listen to the inspector. You can see what all the inspector does. So when you begin to have the conversations with your buyers, and you begin educating your buyers on what to expect, you could be clear on understanding it. But when you get into it, you've been in it for some years and you know, you've done multiple transactions, then I don't feel like you need to spend 2, 3 hours of your time at that house. Now, the client, I think it's good for the buyer to be there because at that point, the buyer can kind of talk to the inspector, kind of hear from his voice. Because keep in mind, remember, this is just one phase of the process. After that inspection is done, that buyer, you kind of want that buyer to move forward. Inspection reports, inspections can scare the bejesus out of buyers. And sometimes it's things that they shouldn't necessarily be afraid of, but because they don't understand and it hasn't been explained to them the right way. And then remember, you're in that option period, so you don't have a lot of time to deal with it. You can blow up a deal, you can miss out on a deal when if it was just better explained and the buyer just wasn't looking at the report and freaking out on what the inspector wrote in the report, that if he had been able to listen or if they had been able to hear from the inspector themselves exactly what he was trying to articulate or actually see it at that time, it probably puts you in a stronger position for that buyer to feel comfortable moving forward with the transaction. So uh, it eliminates those communication gaps by having the client there. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I was just going to add, there's a couple ways of looking at the advantages and disadvantages of being present as an agent. However, I did want to say that as an agent, we are the party that generally confirms or schedules the appointment because we provide access information for the agent. So, excuse me, for the inspector. So unlike the appraiser, we do have a direct line of communication. And a good practice is to establish a rapport with the inspector, even confirming the appointment, thank them for inspecting the home and letting them know that you're available if they have any questions, and to notify you maybe once it's complete, and then follow up, reach out to the inspector and how did it go. But from one stakeholder to another, they may give you a good overview of the condition of the home or what was a major problem and what wasn't. And it helps you to better say the same things to reassure the buyer in that instance and help them interpret maybe the report. So that's just a tip. Thank you for
Great,
allowing me
great,
to share.
great caveat. So Kim, do you go to your inspections? Do you stay the whole time?
Well, I do not go to inspections, and I always communicate because have worked with a lot of first-time home buyers, and they do have a sense of maybe being more secure and having a better understanding with your being present. But I always explain that it's important for them to go along with the inspector so that they can even learn about the home beyond, the condition of the home. You also learn some valuable things about where the main shutoff valve is located and just
Right.
things that a first-time home buyer wouldn't know. But as a professional, being present, maybe seeing some things, hearing some things, makes you more responsible for, as you said, Mike, an inspection can create some challenges for those little things that we understand as professionals. They're easily fixed and can be repaired. But for some buyers, that are experiencing a little emotional remorse as it begins with something on a report, can create maybe concerns where there don't have to be any. And I think we can best approach that objectively and professionally from having not actually walked through, just from what's written on the report. I always request a copy of the report. Sometimes the inspector will include me in the communications, but I'll ask that from the buyer as well to share the report with me so that I can be familiar with it and help them to wade through the language on the report.
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent recommendation. You gotta go through the report with your client, period. So for my brand new agents, you definitely want to get the report. You definitely want to read the report word for word. Read the report because you got, before, for you to explain to somebody else, you got to understand it. And the reports, they're pretty, I say 80 to 85% of the report is going to be uniform across the board, regardless of what inspector you use, because they have to use the same form by law. But some of them are more detailed. They put more detailed verbiage in the inspection than others may do. So you definitely want to read it. You definitely want to get a copy of it. And you absolutely, it is so critical that you spend some time going through it with your client. Like, don't just send it to them, let them read it, and then ask them, what do you want to do? You want to move forward or not? Because 9 times out of 10, especially if it's a first-time home buyer, once they get their report and they just read it themselves, they're not gonna want to move forward, because the inspector is doing what we're paying him to do. We're paying him to go through that house with a fine eye and identify absolutely every single thing that's wrong with the property. That's what you're paying the inspector to do. Go find everything that's wrong with this property, no matter big or small, find it all, put it on this report. That's what you're paying them. So now, if you haven't prefaced your client to understand that's what the point of the report is for, well, when they get that 15, 16 page thing with all the pictures and the circles and the arrows saying this is, with the check saying insufficient or inadequate, when they get all of that, they gonna be like, oh no, man, this is a death trap. We're not buying this, man. Let's get out of the deal. So you cannot handle it that way. You gotta go through it with the client and get them to understand what it's saying.
Okay. We can get the inspector to do that as well, right?
Well,
The last
it
one of the
depends.
inspectors I know that did a presentation, he said he would do that with.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It depends on the inspector, right? Most inspectors, they make their money doing reports, right? So, they make their money getting out there doing inspections, like getting to people's houses. So most of them, they're going to put that on the responsibility of the realtor to articulate that to the client. Now, there have been times where even as a realtor, you're looking at it and you're not fully understanding what it is, to where you would kind of get the inspector on the line and say, hey man, can you explain kind of this area of it? But to go line by line, nah, realtor. I mean, most inspectors not gonna do that. But my man Donovan said he'll do it. Matter of fact, he's gonna be coming back in June.
Okay, good. Because if it's like a plumbing or an electrical or something like that, that may be a little complicated to.
Well, but I mean, they do a pretty good job of explaining stuff under the section, right? They'll have a picture, they have a circle, kind of showing what they were referencing, and then they'll have some verbiage, kind of explaining and articulating what's going on to it. Here's another practice, and Kim, you let me know what you do. I know when I was doing it, I would never send the entire inspection. If we were going to negotiate repairs, I wouldn't send the entire inspection report. I would just send the pages of the report of the stuff that we're negotiating. And the reason that I did that was because if I ever got into a situation where we wanted to get our earnest money back, and maybe the seller acting like they didn't want to give us the earnest money back, then we would throw in, well, look, we'll give you an inspection report. We didn't pay for it, we can't use it, but we'll give you an inspection report as a caveat to maybe convince the seller to give us our earnest money back. How do you do it, Kim?
Well, on that note, I can say, even though I choose and prefer to work with buyers, when I'm training, I choose to train with selling agents, and just to have that foreknowledge, and the mindset, how they think. And a lot of listing agents will not even receive an inspection report from a buyer, and they will put in communications, even you might see in the signature, do not send a copy of the report. And the reason why, again, that scenario of them being now accountable to information that you have handed them as a buyer's representative. And, it's, if they can effectively say, we were not aware of this, now are they obligated to share with the seller this information? So from that perspective, just the standard for me, that practice is not to share the report. However, I can definitely see how it could be supporting documentation for something you're renegotiating, and one page still would protect the integrity of the selling agent.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's a great perspective, Kim. I never thought about it that way because once that seller, once they receive that entire inspection report, if the deal doesn't go through, now the seller got to disclose all that stuff that then came up. But now, as a listing agent, though, what we've done in the past is that if we do have an inspection report, we'll go ahead and put it out there because now it makes our job easier as it relates to a new buyer coming in. Like, hey, look, you ain't really got to do your own inspection, but you can. But here, look at this one right here. Now, do y'all want it or not? Like, so now it prevents us from wasting time. Yeah. Here, look at this inspection report right here. You still want the house?
That's a great point.
Great.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. You still want it? Cool. Let's go. It makes the second go round a lot easier.
The buyers are the ones paying for it.
Yeah.
So why keep having your buyer?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's see what else about the inspection. Right now, how much are they costing, Kim? Inspection reports. I'm asking Kim because she boots on the ground. Like I'm up here in, about $450.
Starting about $450 and up.
Yeah, I remember, man, when I first got in this business, you can get an inspection done for about $200. It ain't like that no more. 450 would have been high, but that's where they started. So that's inflation. Sylvina says she paid $680 for an inspection. Sylvina,
how many square feet?
Yeah, it had to be a huge house. Now I know they do have the inspections. This is something that Terry mentioned earlier about getting inspections on new home builds. I agree. I get inspections on new home builds as well. They even have 1,300 square foot house, $680 inspection. Yeah, Sylvina, whoever that was, burned their car.
Who that was. Put his name in. What was that?
Yeah, put his name in here. Put him on blast because we don't never. That's highway robbery.
The one I had to pay for about 13 years ago charged me $450, and the house was only about 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, that's
I got burned.
yeah. Them things hot. So also, so here, great takeaway from this. As a professional, you need to have relationships with a couple of inspectors so you can understand pricing, right? Even though the buyer is going to, make the final decision of who they're going to use for the inspection report, you still should be able to give them an idea of what market value is for the price, because nobody should be paying $680 for an inspection unless it's one of those inspections where they come out in multiple phases. If it's getting built brand new, because they do have those. And I encourage a buyer to take advantage of that kind of inspection where the inspector will come out at different phases. Maybe they'll come out after they do the foundation, and maybe they'll come out again after they do the framing, come out again after they do the next piece, and then do the final inspection before you close. So now the inspector is able to see and inspect the property under multiple phases. But unless it's one of those inspections, it's no way you should be paying that amount of money for an inspection. So definite side note, get educated, get a couple of relationships, meet some inspectors, ask them about what their prices are, so you can have a general working knowledge of what the prices are out here in these streets. Okay, I know we're spending a lot of time talking about inspections because that was the point of the conversation. But one of the things that came up was about survey, right? And understanding the difference between the inspector, the appraiser, and the survey. So we understand the role of the appraiser. We talked about that earlier. We understand the role of the inspector. We spent some time with that. But what does the surveyor do? And is that mandatory that you get a survey?
I think it's less than 7 months or something like that. A lot of times, of course, if you're financing, lender will require it, and it's always good because it will tell you the boundaries of the home, if there's any encroachments on the property and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So it tells you the boundaries. So the surveyor tells you, in essence, the boundaries of your land, right? Now on the survey, it will show you a little diagram of the house and its positioning. But the real role of the survey is to show you the extent of where your land is, right? You mentioned the word encroachment, and what that means is, you know what that means, right?
If anything is on your property that shouldn't be, that's not in the original survey, and vice versa.
Right. So if one of your neighbors has some stuff on your land, right? So there's this imaginary line that's showing the boundaries of your land, and sometimes things will be built. I remember it was a home in West University that we were the listing agent for, and it was a $680,000 property. It's an older home. Guy was going to buy it, tear it down, and it was a doctor. He was going to tear it down and build his home. Well, come to find out, the neighbors had built a tree house, and a part of the tree house was hanging on the piece of land. And I tell you, we were fighting tooth and nail with the HOA to get that neighbor to have to take that tree house down, and they wouldn't do it. And that guy, he wouldn't buy the house.
Yeah, I
So
live
I'm
with an
like,
encroachment. I live with
oh,
like two
somebody's encroaching
encroachments
on
on
your
my
land?
property.
Mm. How'd
They're
you
they
find out about it, Jamie? Did you do a survey?
Oh no, I mean, you can. Well, you. So I live over here in McGregor
Sometimes you
Estates.
can.
I live over
Okay.
here in McGregor Estates, where pretty much a lot of stuff over here, a lot of us suffer for encroachments just because of the lifestyle of, like, when I say lifestyle, I mean like how the living is over here with like all the forest and everything. So like my
Mhm.
neighbor, she has a tree. I'm looking at it right now. I actually should maybe turn the camera on so y'all can see this.
Look, we take your word for it.
But never mind. Well, anyway, yeah. So this tree is huge. I mean, it's like, I don't know what you call it. It looked like something out of a movie, like the hand of a palm of a hand or something. It's huge. It's like, oh man. So anyway, long story short, my neighbor, she's so great. The tree has been growing into my roof for years.
Oh wow.
And I mean, we've had limbs cut and everything, but yeah. And I
Wow,
have
that's
another tree on
dangerous.
the
That could
other
affect
side
your
of my
homeownership.
property too. That's an encroachment, but it's like it's actually on my property, so it encroaches on the other property.
Mm. Okay.
It's just the
Okay.
way that the house is. I mean, the way that that's why I said that the way that it is over here, like it's almost like you can't help but to somewhat encroach because the trees over here are so huge, and it's a lot of forest over here. You would literally have, which that's what we've been doing this spring. My neighbor, she came and got all those branches cut that was encroaching. But I'm looking at the tree right now. I mean, she would literally have to cut down like two huge trunks of this tree to literally get the entire encroachment off my property.
Wow. So yeah, so it's something out there. So most people, the way that you find it out is doing a survey, right? That's what the surveyor does. Because now, like something like that, where you can kind of visually see, this tree is, really over in my property. But sometimes you can't tell. Like sometimes it may be a neighbor's fence, and the fence where they built the fence, they actually built it on your property. You may see that, or like the scenario I gave with the tree house, right? Not necessarily knowing, because the tree was so close to, because the tree where the tree sat in the middle of the property line. So like half the tree was one neighbor's and the other half of the tree was the other neighbor's. But when they built that tree house on there, so now you've built a structure that is encroaching on to the neighbor's property. So the surveyor is there to help out from that perspective. So when is the survey ordered? So we know that the inspection is typically ordered first. We talked about when the appraisal is ordered. When is the survey ordered?
Inspection, survey, title, and all that work together.
You thought it was all at the same time?
Inspection, title, survey.
No, it's a
Inspection,
process.
title, survey.
It's a process. Usually they order the survey after the appraisal because in many instances, if the house doesn't appraise, and you back out of the deal, well, if you've ordered the survey already, somebody got to pay for that, right? So in many instances, you want to know, let's see, in many instances, you want to know that you're going to move forward with the transaction if you're going to get a new survey. Now, sometimes sellers have existing surveys. So if they have an existing survey, you definitely want to ask them for that. And I think you got to submit this T47 form along with it to the lender. And then if the lender and the title company, if they approve it, then good, we ain't got to order it. But if it's brand new, then I would at least wait until after the appraisal is ordered and you see that it's made its value to try to get the inspection going. Now, sometimes it's not possible to do that because the appraisers are so backed up. In many instances, you may not get the appraisal done 2 or 3 days prior to trying to close. So we'll see. Savina asked, survey wasn't supposed to be done before they list. So if the seller, most of the times the survey is being paid for by the buyer. Like I said, if the seller has one, then they'll submit it. And then, but if they don't have one, then many instances, the survey is the last thing that you order as it relates to inspection, appraiser, and survey. That's typically the last thing that you order. All right. So what other questions do we have? We're going on about an hour at this point. Do we have any other questions or comments before we maybe wrap this thing up?
So the process is normally title, appraisal, survey.
So usually it's inspection, right? Option period. Get past option period.
I forgot about inspection. Flip that now.
Yep. Inspection first. Appraisal and title commitment. Probably do that at the same time. Okay. And then survey.
Why would they do the title? I think about it first. Because when it comes back.
No, that's a good practice. I've talked to some when we did our title company training a couple of weeks ago. One of the things was the title company said when you list the property, if you have a listing agreement, to go ahead and get the title commitment pulled. They'll do it. Most, that a title company they have to pay for the commitment. They got to pay for it, right? So they're comfortable ordering it and fronting that expense if you got a listing agreement. But if you don't have a listing agreement and you go to them and say, hey, look, can you pull a title commitment on this property? Then they can probably tell you no. Now, I don't know if every title company will do it with the listing agreement. We know that they'll pull it if you submit them a contract. They'll pull it. But I think it's a great practice. Once you get the listing agreement, go ahead and if you have a relationship with a title company, have asked them to pull the title. All right, so how much does a survey cost? So Kim's my ear on the streets. How much a survey is costing these days?
Starting at $550.
Say $375.
$550? Jeez Louise. Yeah, man. I remember back in the day, man, $350, $400. That's what you're paying for a survey. $550. Jesus Christ. All right, so
Come on, Mike, you've been saving for this.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad you educated me and updated me because I'd have been out here lying to people. Somebody come to me and say, well, my client paid $550. I'd have got on the realtor. Like, why'd you let your client pay that much for a survey? Are you crazy? So you helping me stay up to speed, Kim. I appreciate it. All right. So that answers your question. What other questions? Does anybody have any other questions about anything that we've discussed? We talked about a lot of appraisals, inspections, appraisals, surveys, these high costs. All of that. Just kind of let everybody know we're originally going to have an inspector, Mr. Joe Poole. He was going to be our inspector for today, but he had an emergency, so I had to jump in here and save the day. But I honestly think that we had a really good training, so we're going to record it. If you maybe came in a little later and you want to see what we talked about earlier, it's going to be on our YouTube channel, say in about a week or so, and for today. So. No other questions or comments or anything. then we're going to go ahead and shut it down for today, and you all enjoy the rest of your Thursday and the rest of your week. We are doing Meet the Broker this afternoon, from 5 to 7. So if you know anybody that's currently in the process of getting their license, maybe they're in class, maybe they're already licensed and they're considering another real estate firm, or if they are considering getting into real estate and they just want to talk to somebody about it, then I encourage you to invite them out to our Meet the Broker today from 5 to 7. All right. With that being said, you guys have a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right, Dre.